Hi, everyone. Welcome to Introduction to Parathletics for Officials, Part 1. My name is Fanny Smith. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Para Development Manager with Athletics Canada. I started in December 2020, bringing over 10 years of experience in para sport, in other types of sports, multi-sport experience at Paralympic Games and Para-Pan Am Games. New to track and field, but learning on the technical side. And today's introductory session is really about giving an overview to parathletics. And there's a part 2 that covers some general disability awareness training. And so I invite you to listen to both webinars to get a good understanding of just, like I said, a quick introduction to parathletics. In a live format, we would have had some Q&A opportunities. So if you do have any questions, you can reach me at fanny.smith@athletics.ca. I do want to take the time to acknowledge that I live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Tsawwassen and Musqueam First Nations on the beautiful west coast of Canada. This is a picture from the beach just down the street from me, so I'm very grateful that they've taken good care of this land since time immemorial. So this session, session 1, really covers the following kind of like overview of parathletics in Canada, a bit of history, a quick overview of what the Paralympic Games are, parathletics at a glance, the different impairment types, sport classes and classification, and just some considerations for you as officials as you start kind of to get introduced to parathletics events. There's a great resource guide that I would say is a good tool to review in combination with this webinar. It's called Becoming Para Ready, and it's available on our website at athletics.ca under Get Involved Parathletics. A lot of the topics that we cover in this session, as well as in Introduction to Parathletics for Official Session 2, is outlined in that resource. So it's a good kind of like opportunity to read it again and have the information kind of settle in. So we'll start with a little bit of history. Parathletics has been in the Paralympic Games since 1960, and Canada has reached the podium at every Paralympic Games since 1968. On the slide here, this picture of Nate Reach. So he is our T37 15-meter Paralympic champion at the Tokyo Games. So we did really well at the Tokyo Games on the Paralympic side, just as we did on the Olympic side. So we had Nate with gold, and Greg Stewart also took gold in the F46 shot put. Brett Lakatos is a veteran on the Paralympic team, and he has added 4 silver medals in Tokyo to his lifetime haul of 1 gold, 8 silver, and 2 bronze Paralympic medals. Marissa Peppa Constantinou and Zhangzhengra completed the medal haul with a bronze medal each. Chantal Petitclerc, who is now, as you may know her, as a senator in the federal government, she is actually our most successful Canadian track Paralympian, and she has 21 medals in total at the Games. Parathletics and swimming, they are one of 2 of the only sports that has opportunities for all 10 eligible impairments as defined by the International Paralympic Committee. So the IPC does govern classification and parasports inclusion at the Paralympic Games, and they have 10 impairment types that they kind of classify athletes in. And Paralympic and swimming are 2 of the sports that have an opportunity for each. So we'll cover that in a little bit, a further slide. So the Paralympic Games also host the parathletics as the largest competition. So on the Olympic side, that is the event that has the most events, the sport that has the most events, and it's the same for the Paralympic Games. So we are going to be looking at 164 medal events at the Paralympics in the 2024 Games in Paris. And it's very much similar to the Olympic program. except with hurdles, steeplechase, hammer throw, pole vault, triple jump, race walk, decathlon, and heptathlon. Those don't exist on the Paralympic side. However, the Paralympic side of programs for para-athletics does have two unique events. So we have the club throw, which is pictured here with the athlete in the wheelchair in the green pants, and she's holding a what looks like a bowling pin in her hand. So that is club throw. Club throw is for individuals that have a higher spinal cord injury and less hand function. So they hold the club between their fingers or whatever grip that they can get onto it. The other very unique event to the Paralympic Games, and this was introduced at these last games, is the universal relay. And that is a really cool competition that includes a relay composition of 2 males and 2 females, and they'll run in the following order. So the first leg will include a visually impaired athlete. The second leg will be for an athlete with an amputation or a similar impairment. The third leg is run by an athlete that might have cerebral palsy, or impairment caused by stroke or a traumatic brain injury. So that is like our T35 to 38 sport class, and that's where Nate Reach would fall in that sport class. And then the fourth leg would be for a wheelchair racer. And so this slide features Jessica Broughton, who was our wheelchair racer in Tokyo in this universal relay. And then looking ahead to possibly in 2028, we will see the addition of frame running. So that is the last picture at the top there. And this is for athletes with more severe impairments, usually caused by cerebral palsy. And they use this little equipment that almost looks like a tricycle, and it has a bench that they sit on, and then they propel themselves forward. So while that is not yet in the Paralympic program, and we're probably looking at 2028 as the earliest introduction to it at the Paralympic Games, this is growing in popularity, especially in Europe. Denmark has a very strong program, and the UK has a very strong program, Australia as well. So domestically, we will start to see this more at events with a big kind of focus happening in Ontario, I would say. So when I talk about the Paralympic program, that just means all the events that are kind of scheduled to be in para-athletics at each event, at each Paralympic Games. So it does vary from one cycle to the next, and that may mean that events are removed or added or changed based on often like just the depth of field. So that could be caused by not enough countries having a specific sport class participating in a specific event. And we'll talk about that a little bit further in this session. There may not be an event available in both genders because, again, there's not enough of one gender participating in a specific event. And so Paris, there will be 3 less events than we saw in Tokyo for para-athletics. So at the domestic level, however, domestic events don't need to follow the Paralympic program. So to offer opportunities for athletes with disability to just kind of get out there and participate and get some track experience or field experience, a domestic program can include a variety of different events and have a wide array that is different from the Paralympic program, just to kind of get athletes going. The rules of para-athletics are governed by the World Para-Athletics Organization, and the rules are almost identical to the World Athletics ones, and the allowances and modifications are really made to accommodate the impairments of the athletes. And so again, we'll cover a little bit more of that. We're not going into the detail of the rules in this session. Other sessions may be available in the future that will cover more technical rules. If you are an official that works in a very specific event, you can reach out to me, fanny.smith@athletics.ca, and I can direct you to someone that might be able to give you more information on that specific event, or direct you to more information on your specialty. And if the rules aren't covered by World Parathletics rules and regulation, you would revert back to the World Athletics ones. So this is just a quick para-athletics at a glance, and that is just showing you the wide array of athletes that show up in para-athletics. So the International Paralympic Committee, the IPC, is a governing body for Paralympic sport and classification, as I've already mentioned. And they use the definition of impairment types as you would see them defined in the World Health Organization. And that is what they use to address athletes with disabilities and determine their eligibility for participation in Paralympic sport. There are 10 impairment types right now that are recognized by the IPC for sport classification at the Paralympics, and they're outlined here, and they're grouped into 3 kind of like overarching categories. So we have vision impairments, intellectual impairments, and physical impairments. Within the physical impairment section, you will have neuromuscular coordination impairments. That's that first line there. Short stature, severe motor coordination impairments. That's what I was referring to when we were looking at frame running. So that is to kind of like be added on in a later time frame. Impaired muscle power or passive range of movement. We're looking at people with spinal cord injury, spina bifida in that category. And limb deficiency is, or congenital limb deficiencies or differences is a bit self-explanatory. So in the neuromuscular coordination impairments, you know, you're looking at cerebral palsy, brain injury, MS, those kind of impairments. So the term disability and impairment, you know, in a day-to-day language, they kind of may seem interchangeable, and I probably bounce back and forth a little bit. So disability really implies that social component, and it's a general umbrella term for it. A person's disability may or may not actually be caused by an impairment. And whereas the impairment refers more to that medical condition that affects someone's function and their ability to do certain activities and how they interact with the world around them, and also impacts their ability to run, jump, throw, and wheel. So also, it's important to note that someone might have a disability, but in the context of the Paralympic sport system and the classification system established by the IPC, they actually might not be eligible to participate in parasport at the Paralympic level. So the classification system is definitely complex, and there's a lot of layers, and we're really just, you know, doing a broad overview in this session. There is a lot of information available out there, so you can Google it, or again, just send me an email if you're interested in learning a little bit more information around that. But you know, broadly, it is a classification system was designed so that athletes are succeeding based on their sporting ability and their functional impairment. And so it's again, it's based on the impairment versus a disability. It does involve some steps. So it will involve some paperwork and someone to review that medical paperwork. It requires physical assessment. So in a kind of like room where they might do some movements on a massage table or with a certified classifier. And then it will require also some assessment in the field of play. So on the track or in the field. And so in some cases, classification might be pretty straightforward. So in the case of a amputation like Greg Stewart here, although I did cut off the picture at the wrong spot, but Greg is missing his arm that's below in the picture. It's pretty straightforward, right? He would be a upper limb amputation. But in other cases, when we're dealing with a spinal cord injury or neuromuscular impairments, those do affect some people very differently. And so that would require a little bit more assessment of the athlete. Classification is often, you know, set, and they will, you know, an athlete may never need another review. And in some other cases, there might be some review that's needed. So in the case of a short stature athlete that is classified for the first time before the age of 18, they would need to be reviewed until they turn 18, which is when they technically would stop growing. In the case of some vision impairments that have athletes that have degenerative disease, they would need to be reviewed, I think it's every 2 years. Or even in the case of an athlete has a condition change, or they have a change in function or an additional injury, that might also require an additional classification. Classification is required for athletes to compete and have their results recorded at the national championships and international competitions like Paralympic Games, Pan Am Games, World Championships, or any other international competitions. So for them to be able to record their performance and get ranked in the ranking system, they do need to have an official classification. However, at the domestic program, local meets and provincial meets, an official national classification is not required. It is also currently not required at Canada Summer Games. And so athletes can still participate. They can have what we would call a provisional classification, which would be assessed, can still be assessed by a classifier, but doesn't require the formal processes of paperwork and in competition assessment. So again, it is definitely complex, and there's a lot of different layers, and this definitely doesn't cover it all. So at the beginning, when I was referring to Nate and Greg, I was referring to their category, their sport classes as F46 or T37. So what does that really mean? So that's just a way to identify sport classes for athletes in parathletics. So the T is pretty self-explanatory. It's either T for track or F for field, and jumping is actually included in track for Paralympics or parathletics. Then the second number would refer to the impairment types. So 1 is vision impairment, 2 is intellectual impairment, 3 is coordination impairment, and so on. And then the second number tends to refer to the degree of impairment. So as a general rule of thumb, and it's not always 100% the case because there's so many variations in people's function, the lower the number, the higher they're impacted by their impairment. So a T11, which is a track visually impaired athlete, would have less vision function than a T13, for example. There is a full grid of sport class breakdown and some more information about classification and sport classes in the Becoming Para Ready document as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about parathletics competitions. So the WPA, so the World Parathletics Sanctioned Competition, is required for those athletes that are internationally classified to ensure that their performance is recognized. So I did cover that a little bit earlier. So athletes are really trying to get a ranking in the world system versus like collecting points along the way and using points to kind of set themselves apart, which is what happens on the Olympic side. So you might have one para athlete at a WPA sanctioned event that you're officiating at. And while it may optically not look that important because it's just one of them, their result could actually affect many different things to just their personal best, but also to actually getting them to qualify on the Canadian Athletics Performance Pathway and for major championship teams like World Championships, like Pan Ams, and even Paralympic Games. So the smaller meets can mean that an athlete is kind of like getting used to the rules and kind of learning to participate, but it could also mean for that athlete that they're showing up and it's WPA sanctioned, and that result could lead to greater opportunities in the future. So as an official, how do you ensure that you're able to support the para athletes that are showing up at your meet in the best way possible? So there's a few different things to consider. One is consider the type of meet that you're at. So like I said, a smaller meet could be athletes trying to compete, and that's just a chance for them to learn the rules and kind of, maybe if the wheelchair racer that it's his first race is crossing the line, maybe that's something that, we don't need to enforce so strongly. At a provincial meet, the athletes are, should really start to learn the rule and working their way towards like a national championship, or they've been to other events before. So that's where we, maybe are expecting them to follow the rules a little bit better. And then national championships would be, at a higher level. And if they're showing up there, they should definitely be following all the rules. So it's a little bit like an age group, right? If you have some younger kids that are at their first like school track meet, like do we kind of like do some modifications and considerations and let a few things go in that case? It's obviously using our judgment situation. But more than anything, we want to make sure that officials at events where para-athletes understand that there are different rules and that the rule modifications are put in place to accommodate their functional impairment. So you can help yourself and help the athletes have a great meet by reviewing the start list ahead of time and being like, okay, I have a VI athlete. This is their sport class. Here are the rules I need to be aware of. Or, I am an official in high jump. There's no para athletes. I don't need to worry about it. And the other thing to consider is that because we have a lot less para athletes in our system, you might have some sport classes that are combined during competition, especially on the ambulatory side. So those athletes that are not in wheelchairs, they might all compete together in one race. So you might have a T13, a T38, and a T20. So a vision impairment, an intellectual impairment, and a neuromuscular impairment. But their times would be recorded separately. We do have a system called the RASA system, which I'm not going to go into that right now, but that does help us determine an overall winner with different classifications throughout the different events. You might also find ambulatory para-athletes being mixed in with the able-bodied athletes of similar performance level. So again, just being aware of who's at the start list and who might have a rule modification associated with their sport class. So it's important not to make assumptions. Not all disabilities will be visible. So an athlete with a vision or intellectual impairment may not appear to have a disability when you first look at them, or ambulatory athlete might blend into that start line that they're being mixed into. So yeah, don't make assumptions, review the list and kind of take that refresher on what you need to know, and rather than, trying to know all the rules all at once. So just a few more things to take into consideration. Again, each specific event type will have its own kind of little webinar. But just wanted to give a few overview of some types of considerations that you might run into, and a few things to consider and think about. So vision impairment. If you are a T or F11 athlete, so you do need to have eye covers. So that means whether you have eye cavities or not, or you have no vision at all. And so that is a rule that you have to wear the eye covers, and they have to be very specific, and that's all written out in the rules. Athletes with upper limb amputations might have some starting block assistance to kind of like make up and help aid them in the starting blocks. Other considerations, for example, would be an athlete with cerebral palsy, which is a disability. They might have balance issues or spasticity, which basically makes it hard for them to stay in the starting blocks for too long. So we want to make sure that we aren't keeping them there too long if you're start official. Same goes for wheelchair racers. Not all of them will have a spinal cord injury. Some might have spina bifida or amputation, which means that their core function and their hand function will be completely different, but they might all be on the start line together. And so for wheelchair races, the commands are exactly the same. So athletes should really have stopped moving and have both hands on the push rim before you give the set command. And so because of that different hand and trunk function, we recommend that you actually watch their hands and see that they've gotten to their mark before moving to the next step. So it's really this fine balance between allowing for further consideration as the moment demands, and making sure that there's not too much bending the rules, or being like, oh, it's so great that you're out here, but kind of giving that mutual respect that they are high performing athlete in their own right. And so understanding when to bend the rules and when to really make sure that they're enforced. So if an athlete is trying to get a world ranking, or they're trying to beat a world record, or whatever it may be, if they're allowed to compete without a rule being enforced, that won't actually count for them. So I'm going to play a little video next, and this video kind of recaps a lot of what I've just covered. Again, this is just a brief overview of parathletics. It's an introduction. If you have any questions, you can reach me at fanny.smith@athletics.ca, and I'll leave you with this video.
Athletics has been part of the Paralympic Games since 1960 and offers a wide range of competitions and events. It's open to male and female athletes in all impairment groups. Classifications start with T for track or F for field. Track events include all distances from 100 metres through to marathon, as well as high jump, long jump and triple jump. Field events include discus, shot put, javelin and the club throw, which is unique to para-athletics. This is followed by a double-digit number. The first number indicates the type of impairment and the second number indicates the degree. The lower the second number, the greater the impact of the impairment on the athlete's ability to do track or field events. T and F 11 to 13 are for athletes with a visual impairment. Rope tethers or other devices may be used by runners to link with their sighted guides. Only in the last 10 metres can they be apart, and the athlete must finish ahead of the guide runner or face disqualification. An assistant may be used to act as a caller to provide acoustic orientation to indicate takeoff in jumping events or throwing target areas. T20 athletes have an intellectual impairment. In the T30s, athletes have a coordination impairment, such as cerebral palsy. T32 to 34 compete in wheelchair racing, and F31 to 34 in seated throws, whilst T and F35 to 38 compete standing. T40 to 41 athletes have short stature. 42 to 44 athletes have an impairment in one or both legs, often requiring a prosthetic, but it also includes athletes with impaired muscle power, impaired range of movement, or leg length difference. In classes T45 to 47, athletes have an impairment in one or both arms. T51 to 54 athletes compete in wheelchair racing due to a leg impairment or loss of muscle power in the legs and or trunk. For field events, these athletes are split over classes F51 to 57, competing in seated throws. They also have a limb impairment, for example, from a spinal cord injury. Whether you want to see athletes run 100 metres in just over 10 seconds, marvel at a high jumper with one leg clearing 2 metres, or a thrower propelling a discus nearly 50 metres, this is the sport for you.
I'm just going to leave my email address there up for a little bit longer. And yeah, thanks for listening.